X Factor Youth. I'm part of the X Factor Youth. Put me on stage, you can find me in the book. Put me on a track like I'm stuck inside a booth. I'm that nigga, young nigga with the truth. Black body with a Jewish mindset flow. Black man with a lot of grind, I know. Inside I go, my mind's on though. I hide my mode, need blind my bro. Never ever did they realize my bro. Grown man making niggas cry, my bro. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and your excellencies, the name is Bliss all the way from the X Factor Youth. Welcome to the X Factor Youth podcast, where we speak about all things excellence, exceptionality, extraordinariness, and exceeding expectations. So the guest that I have today is a very interesting character. We met perhaps about 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, at a workshop. And I kind of like low-key underestimated her, because I remember I was sitting next to her. And then we were there and she eventually went up to speak, right? And then, so she was busy doing her presentation, doing her thing, and then I see like a picture that I recognized. And then I went on to the Instagrams to see where exactly did I find this picture? Where did I see it? Where do I remember it? And eventually popped up that no, man, she's done a youth tour with a very good acquaintance of mine under his organization. But for her as a person, as a personal brand, she's an artist and her art is just beautiful, man. And I decided that one of these days I'm gonna have her in a podcast. She's done magnificent projects. She's gone on to do massive interviews. I mean, we can see her on the YouTubes. And she goes by the name Kganya Mogashoa. How art thou?
Hi Bliss, how are you doing?
I'm good. How have you been?
I'm good. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I think, thank you for deciding to pop by. I really love your story and trust the internet has your story. I'm sure you already know that. But what really stood out for me was your history, your childhood, your past, and then correlating that or cross-referencing that to what you are today or who you are today. But I just wanted, for the purpose of the X Factor Youth getting to know you, who is Madam Kganya Mogashoa?
Well, there's so many ways to answer that question and I never know where to start because there's so many compartments to my life. But in short, for those who don't know me, I am a visual artist who creates artwork that is a form of activism for women's rights and mental health. And I create mixed medium paintings from oil paint, acrylics. I incorporate African fabrics, weaving in our stories and also looking at how women's rights are being responded to on a daily basis and the practicalities around it, the activations that are happening beyond the canvas, and telling stories that people don't know about. There are so many women who have contributed to our political, economic, and social climate who go unrecognized on a daily basis. And I realized that there's so many stories that have gone unnoticed where I would have exhibitions and people wouldn't even know who they are, you know. Someone thought, when I did one show, someone thought Albertina Sisulu was a man. And I was like, oh my goodness, we need to do something about this, you know. And it's people whose names we drive past every day, the buildings we drive past every day, but we don't actually acknowledge how much they've shaped how we function today. If people like Sophie de Brain, for example, didn't choose to stand up for what was right and stop carrying passes. I mean, that's a huge part of what the Women's March was about, right? And we are in August. It is Women's Month. And so I always think to myself that, you know, I wouldn't be where I am today if they decided to shrink back. And so those are the stories that I document, and not just in South Africa, but around the world, because women's rights is not just an issue in South Africa, it's a global thing. You know, that no matter where you are as a female counterpart, you're going to face the same problems. So that just tells us a lot about how society functions and that there are things that need to be addressed and dealt with and broken down.
And then out of all other women that are in the space but not doing it perhaps, why did you feel convicted to be an activist through, through art?
Okay, that's another part that I forgot to mention. I am a social activist as well. I'm very passionate about social justice. I think that I always see myself in light of how God sees me. And I believe that everyone has a mandate to not leave the world the way they found it, even if it's in the smallest ways. And my conviction just came from a place of, instead of complaining about the way things are, do something about it. Because you're looking at someone else hoping that they will change the situation, but they're looking at you and thinking the exact same thing. So, we all have a role to play to be the change that we want to see. And so I think from a young age, I kept on observing these kind of situations, a lot of social ills that were going unaddressed. And really, that feeling you get when you're reading a newspaper article and your heart is bleeding, but you feel helpless because you don't have the capacity to go into there and do something. But I got to a stage where I started feeling like I'm no longer going to do that. I'm just going to take initiative wherever I can.
Nice.
And even though I had a lot of voices telling me who's going to listen to you, but eventually I realized that people actually want to hear about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be showing up at my events. They wouldn't be participating in the conversations that I'm bringing forward.
Yeah, you definitely started something. I think when I was doing my research, like what the movement that you started is pretty dope. It really is. But the interesting thing for me now is you, at 16, from what I gathered, at 16, that's when you started to sort of take art seriously. But before then, I remember you said in one of the documentaries that you, from a younger age, that's when you started probably discovering that, you could be an artist, but you took it seriously at 16. How was it like in the household in terms of the pushback? We all know, I wanted to be a rapper at some point.
Yeah.
And my parents were just not
At
about
some
it.
point.
At some
So
point.
you're not doing it anymore.
No. I've since left that space. But the parents were just like, yo, you are not going to be in, that field because there's a stigma and whatnot. But in your case, the visual art space, I know parents are always like asking themselves, like, is there money in visual art? So how was it for you in your childhood, in your background?
Well, I took art as a subject when I was 16, as you've mentioned. And before that, I've always been a creative. It's just one of those things that I wasn't consciously aware of because we are raised in a very structured academic system where you're expected to excel in sports, and other things, the STEM, which is held as more important than the arts in society, like sciences, technology, economics, mathematics. So I think I've always loved art. I can remember dating back to when I was in primary school, just like, coloring in my books and stuff like that. And art was actually the language that helped me to interpret a lot of things. That's how I actually, for example, started learning how to interpret, my Bible and, other books that I was looking at because I couldn't read. And so images were basically a way of helping me to understand, a lot of things. And so I think from then, when I got to high school and it was time to pick subjects, I felt a little bit, unsure. So I remember at some stage my mom suggesting that, okay, why don't you just, take art? And I thought it was the most craziest suggestion because I thought to myself, me, art. I actually felt intimidated whenever I would walk past, the art studios at school. And then I thought to myself, you know what, let me just try it out. If it doesn't work out, then I'll just switch subjects, it's cool. And then I took it as a subject. It was just one of those things where I took a leap of faith. And one thing about me is that I am a risk taker, okay? And that's part of the reason why I got to where I am today. You know, I don't pull back from something that I feel like I have to do. And so I decided, let me try. And a year later, I then became top student for visual arts, you know, in the entire school. And that was like a source of reaffirming that maybe this is something that I should be doing.
Yeah.
And then also there was a bit of uncertainty still around that okay, after matric, then what? You know? And so I thought to myself, okay, I don't know what to do when I get to varsity. I mean, it's not like I didn't think about doing fine art, but, you know, like you said, with parents and stuff like that, not being sure about which path you're going to take. Are you going to be financially sustainable? I got to varsity, and then I took interior design as a course. I actually got accepted for graphic design, and I was like, no way, I'm not doing graphics. I literally prepared an entire portfolio for graphic design, thinking that it was for the interior design department, because they sent me the graphic design, preparation for an interview. And I thought to myself, this is not what I want. But in any case, in short, during my time doing interior design, I kept on gravitating a lot back to art. And even in interior design, we still had subjects where we had to create artworks. So the good thing about it is that I learned to create with different materials, different techniques. It was my first time using things like watercolor, you know, not things that I didn't really do that much of in high school. So I grasped as much as I could, even in interior, and used it to help me weave what I wanted to do with my fine art. And so in the end, my dad passed away in 2015, so he didn't get to experience that stage, that era in my life where I decided to take a leap of faith in fine art. So when I graduated in 2016 and 2017. I went on further with my BTech honors. And then from there, I did some corporate jobs, designed, residential properties, retail stores, did a whole lot of council drawings and stuff like that, which, I don't really like technical work. So I didn't really enjoy it that much. But I remember 2018 was a huge awakening for me. From that time to 2019, I felt like God was like, okay, now it's time, So 2018, I remember just stumbling across a magazine at church, which they were looking for artists, And I used to keep asking God, where do I fit in here? What am I going to be doing? And so I think that was like God saying, there's your answer, And so that's when I started painting publicly for the first time, and started having a bit more confidence in what I was doing, and even the confidence to tell people that don't address me as an interior designer anymore. I am now a fine artist. And I told my mom the same thing. And I just felt like, if I had to die in the next 24 hours, is this the legacy that I'm going to be happy with? Is this it for me? And I just knew in my heart that this can't be it, I felt like, in a way, that was God propelling me that, you're going to have to account for your life and the choices that you're making. So I looked around the office that day and I thought to myself that this is not what I want as my last and my final goodbye. So that really propelled me to just take the leap of faith fully and really trust in God that everything's going to work out. So from then onwards, I just really started painting during worship nights and entering competitions, doing some artwork for the city of Joburg. I still have a painting at the New Town Park in Johannesburg that I did for a billboard. That was one of the first biggest projects that I did. I remember feeling so afraid to do it because I thought to myself, am I going to be able to do this? But I did it. And it was just a way of me also challenging myself. So in the nutshell, that was a bit of the journey that got me to, leading to where I am today. Yeah.
Interesting. Because your mom wanted you to be an accountant.
My parents did, both of them at some at some point, because I think it was my dad's aspiration actually, because he wanted to be an accountant, right? And you know how things were during the apartheid era. He was not afforded that privilege. He used to tell me that, you know, he went to a university where he wanted to study it and was not allowed because he was black. And that longing to be an accountant has always been a thing for him, right? He ended up becoming a teacher and being very deeply invested in politics and education. But I think that he always had a longing to fulfill that aspiration that he felt was stolen from him as his dream. And also because, you know, according to society, it's a good paying job, you know. But I think, there came a point in time where my parents started acknowledging that I'm not wired for that, you know. There comes a time where you wrestle with the thoughts and the feelings, and then you reach a stage of acceptance where it's like, okay, this is how our child is and we can't change it. And I also had to get to a stage where I had to set boundaries for myself to acknowledge that I have to take responsibility for my own life and the talent and the gift that God has given me, you know.
You're very headstrong with that though, because I remember in one of the documentaries, your mom mentioned that she took you to an interview. I think you were for your interior design. And one of the things that stood out for her was when you said to the person that's interviewing you that you want to be able to enhance aesthetic spaces.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, man, even I was like, woof, that gave me goosebumps because I'm like the pushback. And you were so headstrong in that. And, you know, I applaud you for that. I really do. Because it's not easy convincing your parents, especially, it comes from a loving place. But I think for us to be like, no, despite that, let me figure it out on my own. If I don't make money, I don't make money, but at least I know that I have my freedom. And not many people do that. I mean, there's people that are in their 40s. They're like, yo, I wish I could have sung more, but they're in medicine. And you're like...
That's what I don't want. See, that feeling is the worst feeling. And it can lead to a lot of depressive episodes. I think that it's so important that you acknowledge and realize that you're given another day for a reason. If God felt like, you know what, you're done for the day or whatever, he could have just easily taken you, you know. Your job is done.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're still here means that there's something that is still unfulfilled, that you still need to do. There's unfinished business that you have. And so I think that that's something that also helps to keep me grounded, that listen here, you're here for another day for a reason. You're here for another 24 hours to fulfill something. And so I don't think I'll be able to live with myself knowing that I've wasted that opportunity, because it will never come again. You know, once it's gone, it's gone.
Facts. No, man, I applaud you. I applaud you. And I think I want to get to this point now. Visual art.
Yeah.
Fine arts. I think I sort of understand what your parents were getting towards. I told you a story off air that, you know, I was in Paris when I still stayed in Germany for a bit, and I went to the Louvre Museum and I got to see all the fine art and stuff. You know, first of all, I didn't even know what the Louvre Museum was about. I remember I was by one of the triangles and I was on Google. I was like, yo, what can I see? And then it said Louvre Museum, like, yo, let me try it out. It's only when I was inside, I was like, yo, I've seen some of the art that's here. You know, it's from the Jay-Z and Beyonce song. I'm like, yo, I've seen that. Then it was like, yo, it's that museum. But, you know, you see the art and you see the Mona Lisa and you see like there's a long queue. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. Like, what is the hype behind the art here? Like, yes, I mean, stuff that was designed centuries ago, it's pretty cool, but it's like, what am I missing? Maybe I'm not as cultured or as well versed in art. Yeah. And I ended up having that imposter syndrome. I was like, yo, maybe I'm not meant to be here. Meanwhile, it's an opportunity, but it's like, nah, why am I not feeling the urge to be part of that line so that people can take selfies when I can just like go the other side, take a picture, and be out. And it hits me to this day. I'm like, yo, man, I actually need to get well versed so that I get to understand. And I still think this fine art stuff is for the bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
So I really want you to educate me. Like, what is there to look out for in the fine art space? What do you look out for as an artist so that I can help bridge that gap?
So I think that one of the things that maybe it's because of the content that I like creating, I usually look out for, what female artists are doing, because, for the longest time, female artists have been marginalized in the art space. So there's a lot of change happening there as well. I think it's so important that we tell our own stories. There's a saying that says that if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you. I think one of the trends or the things that are happening a lot lately is artists are becoming more, bold in their activist approach. Artists becoming more confrontational about what's happening around the world. It's not just about the techniques and the fact that you used pearls and whatever. All those things are also important, but it's, what is the art saying? What is it speaking into society? What is it saying about our culture? What is it saying about our social ills, our political situation? I think that that's something that a lot of artists are starting to embrace and to speak openly about, because it's not easy to, be liberal sometimes. People are afraid of being politically incorrect and addressing certain issues. So I think those are some of the things to look out for. There's also a lot of conversations about, cultural erasure. And I think that's why, the African art market is doing so well at the moment, because there's a lot of, conversations about racial injustices, how our historical context influences our modern day era today, the build up of all of that and where we are now. And I think also there's conversations around where we see ourselves in the future, So I think justice is becoming, a point of subject matter. Things like environmental justice as well are starting to become a thing. So in terms of what I'm looking out for, it's definitely artists that are speaking into social justice and artists that are coming up with practical solutions beyond just showcasing art and bringing aesthetic appeal. I always think to myself that, what's the point of hosting an entire art exhibition if people are going to leave the same way they've arrived, And yes, people will collect the art, but in the end, people collect art and then they put it away, and then something else is trending. Then they put that away, and then something else is trending. But we really need to think beyond just, creating artwork for aesthetic appeal. So that is definitely something that is very close to my heart. And I'm definitely looking out for, especially Black female artists, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited for the next chapter of my life right now, where I have an opportunity, which I'll share later, about a collaboration that I'm going to be doing with another female artist, because, it's very rare where we come together and do stuff like that. So there's definitely a huge shift happening, not just in politics, but also in the arts as well, when it comes to, stereotypes and what's expected of female artists. And I still get experiences like that where I have a show and people think I'm just the administrator or I'm just the curator. And when I tell them I'm the artist, they're like, "You're the artist?" They're expecting me to be there to be the salesperson or something like that. So I think that there's a lot that has to change in terms of how people are wired and how they see art. So I think, yeah, I would encourage you to look out for art that speaks into those narratives, and also look out for exhibitions that are happening around, your context, your immediate context. Almost every week there's exhibition openings. Those are opportunities to participate in activations where there's things like panel discussions, discussing these subject matters, which are so important, because artists, to a certain degree, do shape our culture and the narratives that we choose to entertain. So it's important, I think, for people to be present in those rooms and not feel like, this is for people who are artsy. These are conversations that are very important, that inform our creative process as well, that you're consuming on a daily basis.
True.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether you are consciously aware of it or not. So I think, that's where I'm at in terms of what I'm looking out for, and just looking for opportunities to disrupt the gatekeeping in our industry as well. I think that's what more or less where I am in my headspace.
Okay. I want to touch on the gatekeeping aspect.
Yeah.
You mentioned, because again, I still think like fine arts, especially if you look at the space like architecture, interior design, it's only open to a few people. And as you said, like art does shape, society. If you look at architectural designs, I mean, we still talk about Queen Victorian, buildings to this day. In Europe, they talk about the Gothic architecture. So it does shape the society. And I think personally, the elitists have made it difficult in terms of barrier of entry. Because I mean, I was watching a podcast by the Penwell Show, and one of the people there is like a master's in architecture, and they say that the barrier of entry for people to even qualify, it's difficult, but also the idea of knowing that you're going to be an architect, it's from a young age. I mean, it comes to people buying books on buildings, and all of us in grade 7, I remember there was this kid that used to just go to the library for those books on particular. I'm like, what the hell? Like, why would I get a book on buildings? But it's like, no, he had a plan. But also, he came from a rich background. You know, he was one of those people that played the piano, the violin, all that stuff. And it's like, okay, clearly there's something there that is open to a very few. But now you in that space, what have you seen in terms of gatekeeping, the clickiness? What have you experienced there?
Wow, that's very interesting, because I didn't study fine art. So I basically had to work my way up, literally, from the bottom up. Whereas, people who study fine art, at least they're given that opportunity to access certain, people to a certain extent. I'm not saying that they have it perfect, but it's definitely slightly easier to engage with certain people like curators and stuff like that, because universities, make you participate in practicals and stuff like that, I think from my personal experience, and I'm speaking for myself, of course, in the early stages of my career, I kind of felt a lot of seclusion, even though I knew that I was good at what I was doing. But it was just the thing of, it's all about who you know. And it still is like that. I think that I always tell people that if you don't have access to the right people, if you don't have the right networks, it's either you're going to, you will make it, but there's a threshold that you won't be able to get past, or you just won't make it at all. So out of my frustration, I decided to whatever opportunities were there, I would just participate in them. Like, as I mentioned earlier, I would enter competitions. I would, participate in whatever community projects there were related to art. And that's how I started building the momentum around my portfolio, and the visibility of my work started growing as well. I think that it's very sad, because artists generally, from my experience, are not really open to to connecting. Even in the art building, you find that everyone is just locked in their studios. There isn't a sense of community or, let's do something together, let's support each other. And it's even harder if you're a female artist because, first of all, already it's overwhelming because it's a male-dominated environment and there's no sense of, community. So I think that there's also that feeling that people get to a certain stage in their careers and then they want to keep the opportunities to themselves. They don't share them with anyone else. If they see something, they won't tell you. I remember I had this one encounter with this one established artist whose name I will not mention. And that was like way back when I was still in the early stages and trying to figure my way out around this. And I asked her to for advice on, what she thinks I can do in order to, grow in what I'm doing. And she just literally told me that, you're wasting my time. I don't have time to be answering these kind of questions. And that kind of like set a tone for me that, actually, I'm not going to ask these people for help anymore. Because artists are generally, from my experience, a bit cocky. People just like acting brand new when they get to a certain caliber in their careers. And even before they become that, they start becoming very, I don't know, like snobby, sort of like. And in terms of like your galleries and museums and stuff like that, they do have their specific niche market that they're trying to attract. They have their art collectors. And so they will generally, select artwork based on what they think is going to sell. Because at the end of the day, they're also trying to keep their lights on. You know what I mean?
Got you, yeah.
So if even if your work is really amazing, if they feel like it's not going to be suitable to who they're going to sell it to, then chances are they're not going to put it on the market. So I think that one of the things that I encourage people to do is rather go to a space that speaks to your values and the kind of content you're creating. So if I'm creating work based on women's rights, it's very unlikely that I'll go to a gallery that's pushing, climate change, for example. Gotcha. It's not in line with what I'm doing. But I also think that there is an element of knowing people. I've been to a lot of art events, art fairs and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. But if people don't know you, they don't know you exist, they know nothing about your work, chances are they're not going to let you into the circle. It's like, who are you? That's the kind of energy that you'll get, generally speaking. So I think that it's all about who you know, with the whole gatekeeping thing. There's a lot of artists out there who create a lot of questionable art.
True.
And you just wonder, how did this person's artwork make it here? But it's because of their connections, which is why I really encourage networking a lot. Even if you're just going there just to ask questions or speak to the curator, you never know, and just try and put a word in that, hey, this is the kind of content that I create. And, that's how those kind of conversations sometimes just happen. It doesn't have to be anything, rigid. You could just go there and ask questions and engage. Go to the speaking engagements, participate in the panel discussions or whatever talks are happening there, But I do think that, for me personally, one of the reasons why I'm working so hard to upskill myself is because I see a gap in that space where there's a lot of gatekeeping that I want to disrupt. Because there's so many talented artists out there that are not given a chance. And I do remember in the early stages of my career when I tried reaching out to certain people. I remember there was this one gallery that told me that, you know, your work is too political or something like that, you know. But over time, I chose not to compromise on my artistic direction. I still continued doing what I'm doing. And I decided, let me work with those that want to work with me. But I think the gatekeeping thing is, it's still a huge problem that we need to find ways to work around by engaging with the gatekeepers themselves. I think one of the things that I do sometimes, I invite them to events that I do, if I know them personally, just to get a feel of how we can do things differently. And I think they appreciate that sometimes, that, wow, I once invited a curator to a show that I curated myself.
Nice.
And she was deeply humbled by that experience, because at first she didn't understand, like, how is this connecting? But when she got there, she was like, oh, okay, I can see what it is that you're trying to do here, you know. So also just kind of bringing in different perspectives in their space. Because at the end of the day, they're just normal human beings like you and me. And they will do things to the best of their knowledge and how they've been wired by the industry, you know. But the saddest part is that, as I mentioned earlier, is people not being selfish with opportunities. I think that's where the core of it is. It's like, once they make it, they want to keep it there, within their circles. And that's a space that I think has to be disrupted, you know? So I'm still navigating my way through it. I haven't completely figured it out. I think I'm still growing when it comes to understanding how to interact with these people, and helping them to understand how to be more inclusive. I know that art is a very sensitive environment, you know, especially when it comes to money. There's a lot of money circulating, and you know, art collectors have their market and all of that. But yeah, I think in a nutshell, I will say that we really need to change how we see the market, how we see ourselves, and how we're treating other people, wherever we are, so that you don't end up becoming a gatekeeper, even if you're unconsciously aware of it, you know? Yeah.
One of, and you don't have to answer this, but like one of the gatekeeping that you face, is it not somewhat also from a funding perspective? Like, is there a lot of pushback there as well?
I think that funding is definitely a problem. It's not just a South African problem, it's a global problem. You know, I think that we do have a leadership issue when it comes to how funds are being dispersed in our industry. And it's also a thing of, I don't think that we have enough leaders that understand the arts well enough to know how to make it sustainable. I think that we do have a lot of leadership structure problems and a lot of political interferences when it comes to the financial resources that are circulating in the visual, or let me just say the arts sector in general, you know. Funding is definitely a topic that always keeps coming up, you know, because when artists are mentioned, they're usually at the very bottom of the list of priorities. I mean, even when you listen to the president during a budget speech, you know, art is either not mentioned at all, or it's at the very bottom of the list of agendas, you know. So it's not really prioritized, and that kind of sends a very strong message that it's not worth investing in our economic activity. So I think that when it comes to funding, it's I don't know. I think I don't mind some of the funding opportunities. sometimes I feel that it's not a sustainable way of keeping us going as artists. You do have to get to a point where you can actually, make a living from what you're doing and not have to keep on, going from one finding opportunity to the next. But I find that I have approached some some government, officials about this, and sometimes, in most cases, they just never come back to you, or you just, you don't get a response, or even if they tell you, this is what you should do, it's like, yeah, I've already tried that, can we come up with a more sustainable solution, So I think that it's also just a thing of people have the resources to help you, but they're just not making an effort. They're deliberately choosing not to do anything about it. It's not that we don't have the solutions. We just don't have leaders that are willing to fully implement, So I think in terms of, gatekeeping in that way, I would say that the corruption aspect of it plays a huge role, because a lot of funds are not being dispersed the way they should. And I've seen personally projects where artists would approach, an arts funding organization, whether it's a government. Mostly these encounters are in government, where there's a certain amount of money that's allocated to a project, but you don't know that, right? You just the artist. You just know that, oh my gosh, I'm getting, let's say, 50K for this project. And those are the funds that are dispersed to you, right? You're excited because you need that money. But you don't actually know that behind the scenes, that project was actually worth 200K. So what happens to the rest of that money, So it's also people just like giving opportunities like that to each other, and leaving the breadcrumbs to the artists to say, oh, this is what we've done for their documentation purposes in the media and stuff like that. So unfortunately, that's the reality of what happens sometimes.
Crazy, man. But despite those challenges, you've managed to come through with a very dope project that you did last year, Sheroes and Herstory. Can you just tell us about that?
So Sheroes and was inspired by a concept around women being represented on our currency, on our banknotes, our coins. And this idea came about during lockdown, actually. Like, I was literally washing dishes, and I just heard a voice say to me, have you ever seen a woman on a banknote before? And I thought to myself, no. And at that time, I was preparing for my first exhibition at State Theatre, which was Women Are the Architects of Society. And it was just one of those where I had, sent a proposal, waiting for a response, and I had forgotten about it. And as soon as I got that idea, I felt like God was like, okay, well, there's your project, So I ran with it. And then I started producing my first set of artworks for that particular show. And then when I got to Sheroes and I wanted to make it a bit bigger. I wanted to make it a point that people walk away from the exhibition really understanding the importance of why we need to change how we see ourselves and how we see women, So I started doing a lot of research around, African Sheroes, from your Winnie Mandelas. And we think we know them, but we really don't, If you read, for example, Coretta Scott King's story, she was just seen as Martin Luther King's wife. What else do we know about her besides that, Needless to say that she contributed a lot to the movement that he did. She spoke a lot into his life and helped him with his campaigns. But she's just seen as, the woman behind, this heroic figure. Same with Winnie Mandela. So I really just wanted to take a moment just to remind us about who these women are and why do we even celebrate Women's Month every year? Like, what's the point of us having this day on the 9th of August? What does it mean for us? And even International Women's Day. These are significant milestones in our social justice journey as a human race. You know, we've gone from, you know, women not being acknowledged at all, not being allowed to have jobs, or even let alone, you know, cross to the other side of town, to being in a place today where we can encompass so many spaces in society, you know. And I think that that's something that needs to be celebrated and acknowledged, because it takes a lot of tenacity to break social ills. You know, I mean, I think I also felt like there were a lot of women who are still with us, who are still alive, who are still not appreciated. And I went throughout my schooling career, you know, doing history. I never once recall learning anything about them. I've never read anything about Charlotte Maxeke at school. I've never read anything about Sophia Williams-De Bruyn. I've never read anything about Helen Joseph, you know, and I'm wondering, where are those stories in our, you know, our history books? And I actually, when I went to Cape Town for the first time, I visited the slave lodge as well, just to kind of understand the build-up of events to, you know, where we are today. And that really changed my perspective a lot. And it made me realize that actually there's also a threshold in terms of how far women can go and how far they can be celebrated. Because I think for the magnitude of the suffering that women like Charlotte Maxeke had to go through, I mean, you know, she was the first woman, a Black woman in South Africa to, you know, go overseas and study and go beyond the parameters of her social constructs, which were stay at home and, you know, maybe take care of her family or whatever. But she decided to take it a step further, educate herself, and do more for society, you know. And I think we take for granted how much it took for them to do that, especially in a world that didn't really acknowledge the magnitude of their presence. Women like Harriet Tubman, for example, you know, who set such a huge precedence for so many people to be set free from a system that was so inhumane and oppressive. And I think when I look at those kind of stories, it makes me appreciate them even more. And I think we were missing that so much in our society. We don't appreciate where we are right now, because we were not there. We didn't feel their pain and their struggle. And what I did with Sheroes Rands is that I decided to document all their stories and create coin renditions of, you know, what it would be like if we had actual coins. And interestingly enough, when I did Women Are the Architects of Society, I discovered that in America, they were actually rolling out coins, $quarter coins of Maya Angelou on them.
Nice.
And I thought to myself, okay, this is interesting because it's in line with what I've been thinking about, you know. And it's not even just about them being on the banknote. That's not the achievement. The idea is that it's a culture shift, you know, from treating them as less than, less human, less important, to actually seeing them as people that are worth contributing to our politics, our society, and our economic activity, right? And so what I did with that exhibition is that I took it a step further, and I actually invited some of the women that I painted about to the actual exhibition, because I also wanted that to be an opportunity, even for the younger generation, to see them there, to experience them there while they're still with us, and to acknowledge them, you know. And so I thought to myself that, you know what, I've never studied about people like Sophia Williams-De Bruyn. She's the last surviving woman in South Africa to have led the Women's March in 1956. And I thought to myself, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I will.
Nice.
So I looked for her. I looked for her and I found her, you know, after about a couple of months. And same with Dr. Mpho Phalatse, you know, I think when she became mayor in Johannesburg, that was such a defining moment for me as a young black woman, to see someone of my likeness making such a huge impact in society, that actually we can do this, you know what I mean? I thought it was really inspiring, and it propelled me to push myself even more. So I decided to also invite her as well. And both of them fortunately came to the party. I was so stressed out. I thought to myself, what if they don't pitch?
Yeah.
You know, at that time, Dr. Mpho was still busy with her political campaigns, but she still made time to come to the event and to support, you know, and yeah, and participate in the conversation about the shift that needs to happen in society. And I think that every opportunity to bring change in society at first will be met with resistance, just like slavery, or you know, women's rights. And even when Jesus had to, you know, come into the world and tell his side of the story, he was met with crucifixion. So I think that with this event, I really just wanted to make sure that their stories were known, and that people really acknowledged them and appreciated them. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because, you know, that was one lived experience that I might never have ever again. And I also felt that, especially with Sophie de Bruyn, right, she's really getting old. So I was like, if I don't get her now, it's going to be too late. And I don't want to be that artist who only paints people when they die, you know? They need to know that what they've done is appreciated and acknowledged while they're still with us. They deserve their flowers while they're still alive. And same with Dr. Mpho. Even though she didn't serve her term for a very long time, she needed to know that her being the first black woman to lead our city is a moment that deserved to be celebrated. You know, that is an accomplishment on its own, because we've come so far to be where we are today. And it's not something that should be taken for granted. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think, you know, I really just wanted to take those images and bring them to life, and take those stories and use them to speak into the changes that we need to make internally in our modern day context.
Wow, that's beautiful. The press run, I wanted to know, how did you feel knowing that you were doing like these interviews? I mean, you were at SABC, you did Newsroom Africa, E! News came through to the event as well. How did that make you feel, knowing the work that you put in, not on just the art, but also organizing the event, finding the people? As Kganya Mogashoa, how did you feel at that moment? Did you take time to absorb it? What is going through your mind when it finally, you know, manifested?
Wow, I think that I think at first I was surprised at how people came out. You know, like I said, there was a time when I was just sitting in the stillness of my own quietness. And at some point there was a voice that was just like, no one's going to listen to you, you know. But I think when I saw people coming out in numbers and really wanting to know more about it, it made me realize that there is a gap somewhere here in our society that is not being filled. And it also made me realize that my voice was speaking into the injustices that people were feeling, but didn't know how to articulate, you know? So the artwork was a way of, you know, amplifying the voice in them that has always been there, but maybe they were too afraid to speak about it openly. Maybe they were too scared to say, this is how I feel. But when I said it, it was like, that's exactly what I wanted to say.
Got you.
So I think it made me realize that it's definitely something that needs to be talked about more. And not just talked about, but something actively done about more, you know. people see injustices every day, but sometimes they feel so far removed from the reality of being a change maker in the situation. They feel like, let someone else deal with it. Let me just go on with my day-to-day life. But I think that exhibition, it really surprised me as well. I'm not even gonna lie.
Sure.
I never expected ENCA to be at my show. I never expected SABC to be interested in having a conversation with me. Although those are outlets that, State Theatre does try to organize for the artists, for promotional reasons.
Got you.
But obviously the news anchor can be like, nah, let's rather talk about something else. I think it was a shock to me as well. I never really expected the kind of reception that I got. The media was buzzing at the time. Even till today, I still do get calls from people that, hey, tell us a little bit more about what you do. It just goes out to show me that what I'm doing is something that needs to be heard more of. And it's something that people desire to know more about because it's things that affect their daily lives that they don't speak openly about sometimes, So I think I was really, really amazed. And I'm grateful that, they were willing to come out and document my story and the stories that I was putting out there. I think it's about time, There's no reason why we can have a rhino on our banknote, but we can't have Charlotte Matek, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it was an awakening as well to conscientizing people to that reality that actually, you're right. Why not?
Yeah. That's beautiful. And it all comes full circle now because I think it's not by coincidence that you want women in banknotes. You are a fine artist, interior design, you are a social activist, and now you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you even speak the lingo now. It's like, there's a gap in the market. I heard you. So you can tell us, if you can tell us about the business side now, about your company. How has that been and what is your company all about?
Okay, so, wow. I think when I started my business, I just thought to myself that I'm just going to create art, sell, and that's it. But as time went by, I really started to feel like there was a growing concern in my heart of social ills that were not being responded to. So Kganya's art was really born. Initially, if I'm being honest, at first it was just about making money.
Gotcha. And that's okay.
And then as time went by, I think it was during lockdown, where there was a surge in gender-based violence cases in the country, which was, I think there was a season where it was really dark, where Tejo Fatsopule was killed. There was a time of also Karabo Mukwena. Those were like very, triggering stories where I felt like, man, this cannot be how we function. And then we just wake up and go to work as if nothing is happening. How do we do that as a nation, Which I think that's one of the reasons why I couldn't stay at my previous work environment, because I couldn't live with the fact that I'm going to work, this is my life every day, but we're not doing anything to really, fix or solve some of the issues in our society. So the business side of my business, so Kganya's art eventually became a platform not just to create art and sell, but to also build partnership capacity with organizations that are interested in artwork that is going to leave a lasting impact in society. So to break down my company name, I know a lot of people will probably wonder, like, why Kganya's art? Why didn't you name it Kganya Art or whatever, First of all, there was a company called Kganya Art, I think, that I saw. Because, before you create a company name. You do your research and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I also just felt like I didn't want the organization to be about me, you know. I know a lot of artists name their companies after themselves, but I just felt like I want to create an ecosystem that goes beyond myself, that will reach many people and tell other people's stories. So I think also because as I was growing in my craft, I realized that there's some formalities that need to be put in place in order to participate in certain partnerships, to get certain funding opportunities. You need to have company documents, right? It's the standard procedure. You need to have your SARS documents and all of that. That's also another thing that motivated me to take on the entrepreneurship side of things, so that, you know, I can be a reputable organization to those who want to work with me. And Courageous Art is basically a representative of the first letter of my name. And my name is Kganya, and it means light. And another meaning is God's light as well. So I do believe that everything that I do is meant to be a light to the world. So whether I'm painting, whether I'm going to do a speaking engagement, in all the, you know, artistic things that I do, I believe that ultimately that's the goal. It's to bring light. Hence, I am invested in speaking into social injustices, right? And then the other part of it is a bit more spiritual. It's more deeper. So, which is oranges, right?
Got you.
People are like, why K oranges? Yellow and red are two colors that create the color orange.
Yes.
And that was an inspiration that came later on after I came up with the name Courageous Art, funny enough. So then I asked God, what should I say? What is Courageous Art? What do you think it is? And then I started doing research about, you know, what that color symbolizes from a spiritual point of view. And yellow symbolizes passionate praise, and red symbolizes the blood of Jesus. So all of that coming together is basically the core of speaking into human rights and the justice that, you know, God so much yearns for all of us. And I believe, you know, God does love justice. And which is why I can't see myself creating any content that doesn't actually change the status quo, that doesn't trigger people to think differently or challenge them to make better choices, right? And conscientize them to their own behavioral patterns and thinking patterns. That's one step away from us living a changed life. So anyway, I'm diverting, but that's what makes up, you know, my company name. And then the entrepreneurship side of it, as I said, came in where I had to now start making money and, you know, engaging with other companies that wanted to partner with me, that were funding my projects as well. So at first it was like, okay, cool, I'll just enter competitions here and there. But there were some that were requesting some paperwork. And then that's when I decided, let me just put my stuff in line and my ducks in a row. And then I started coming up with like 3-year plans, you know, of what I'm going to be doing beyond this. And then the idea started coming that, okay, fine, I want to do art exhibitions. I want to do speaking engagements. I want to partner with companies that are invested in advancing women in society, social ills. There's so many projects that I want to do, and maybe even, I don't want to give away too much information. Actually, let me just leave it there, because as I said before, I don't like sharing information prematurely, but I do have a lot of ideas, business ideas around what I want to do. So me going into entrepreneurship was basically laying the foundation for all the, you know, the projects that I'm going to be doing, and also bringing sustainability into it, because, you know, it's one thing to have talent and have skills and a gift, but you also need to understand the business side of it so that you're able to be financially lucrative. Because at the end of the day, you want it to work. You don't want to find yourself in situations where you're going to have 10 jobs for the rest of your life. You want to focus on the core of what it is that you're called to do. So I think a part of the reason why I also wanted to go into entrepreneurship was to also challenge our economic sector in terms of how the arts is moving, bringing some kind of structure as well into my, admin, because as artists, we don't really have a framework of how to move because our industry is not regulated. So it kind of makes it difficult for you to know how to position yourself, especially financially, So I think one of my future aspirations is to also solidify financial stability in the visual arts sector, coming up with solutions for that, so that we don't find ourselves going through cycles of having to ask for funding every single time we want to do something. There has to be a point where we can actually live off what we do. So yeah, I think that that's where the entrepreneurship side of things comes in. And I'm very passionate about learning about business because it sets a tone and a structure for how things should be managed. Especially, I know I keep emphasizing this, but finances are a real thing.
Yeah. For real.
So you can't run away from that. I think automatically when you become an artist, you automatically become an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not. Because you do have to learn how to sell your work. You do have to learn how to not just sell like as in, financially, but verbally as well. You need to be able to sell your content to your audience, knowing how to get the right market. All those things come into play, You can't avoid it. You can't run away from the fact that you need to know how to package your talent in such a way that people are willing to invest into it. And we need that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And is Kganya art, are you in the startup phase? Do you have a team? If you are in the startup phase, be honest. What's it like being the only person, a one-man show, designing or making the art, then transitioning now from artist to trying to sell this particular painting? How has that journey been?
It's been tough. I'm not gonna lie. As I said, it's because we don't have a regulated industry. I sort of had to wing my way through it. There's no kind of framework or structure that tells you that, okay, this is what you need to do. And I think even our education system doesn't prepare you for entrepreneurship. They are preparing you to work for someone else. But then, not everybody wants to work for someone else. So what do you do then? I know people with PhDs that are sitting at home and the art is not selling and they're frustrated. But to answer your question, right now, most of the time, I am doing a lot on my own. And it's not because I want to. It's simply because I don't always have the financial capacity to actually hire a whole team of people. You know what I mean? And it doesn't make it any easier for us as artists when our industry is not regulated, because we're prone to be taken advantage of financially, with certain opportunities as well. And so I think it's very challenging. I still have to wear a lot of hats in my business. I mean, I've only been doing this for about, let me see, from 2020. It's about almost 4 years now. It's 2024, right? Which is not a long time, but I think that right now I'm not at a stage where I can say I have that capacity to like hire an accountant and a marketing manager and all of that. So I do have to try and find ways to juggle all of it. I'm not perfect at it, but I always try my best to make sure that I show up for myself and the business, because at the end of the day, I need to make it work. I need to grow what I'm doing, and I need to put food on my table, right? So a lot of the times, because I'm still trying to figure it out, fortunately, I do have a company of good friends and, business people. Again, that's where the networking factor comes in. You meet a whole lot of people who find what you do interesting and they're like, oh, cool. And then next thing you know, people are willing to partner with you. They're like, hey, you have a show, let me do your emceeing. Let me help you out with, furniture or whatever, so I try to also just nurture my relationships in that way, where, I find myself sometimes in situations where people offer to help me. And also I outsource wherever I find necessary to. There's just certain things that, even if I try really hard, I'm still going to battle a little bit with, like, for example, a website. I don't know coding. So I'm definitely going to need someone to assist me with that. So if I do have a project where I get funds, then I put them aside for that. Or, I'll put it aside for an accountant to make sure that my books are done properly. So it's a challenge, but the thing about visual art is that when we have events like exhibitions or, especially when you have a gallery representing you, the positive thing is that the gallery does all the admin for you.
I see. Okay.
So all you need to do is bring the art. Okay. And then they will market it. They will put it out there. That doesn't mean, obviously, that you're excused from doing anything. Obviously, you'll try and market it on your side as well to your people and whatever. But they usually take the job, the honest to share the content, to take your artwork and, show it to their collectors and stuff like that, because they know their market. They know who's going to buy it. That's why they asked you to come, because they liked your work and they saw that, okay, this can actually, attract the people that we have here. So we very fortunate where we have galleries helping us with that. And then, of course, when there's a sale, they'll take a percentage of that to cover, those costs. And they do also understand the risk of, bringing you on as well. I mean,
Gotcha.
they understand how the art world goes. There's no guarantee that your art is going to sell, right? So they know that, okay, fine, you'll sign an agreement that, this is what's going to happen if the art sells. But even if it doesn't, we'll market it anyway. We'll do, the pamphlets, the brochures, the catalogs and all of that. So they do calculate all of those risks as well, understanding and knowing what artists are going through. So I think I'm when it comes to that, I'm covered to a certain extent. I don't always feel like I have to get a marketing manager or stuff like that. Of course, there will come a time where I can afford all those things. But for now, what I try to do with the resources I have is to create as much content as possible and build my portfolio. And then I think as time goes by, I'll get to that stage. So that's how I manage, my admin and all of that. I'm not always online on Instagram every day posting, but I do try to set a precedence on my page that, I'm still here, I'm present. I post whenever I can, when I have time. At the end of the day, I'm a human being. I can only do so much. I can't spread myself into 5 different things every day. You know what I mean? So I think that's what has helped me along the way. It's just acknowledging my limitations and doing the best that I can with what I have and starting where I am with what I have.
And if you've gone on to sell, I mean, people have purchased your paintings. What is that feeling like when the deal is signed or someone has purchased some painting of yours?
Well, I think that it is a good feeling to see the racks coming into your account.
Yes, sir.
I've had a lot of more like organizations buying my artwork as opposed to individuals because the work I do is meant to reach a wider audience. Not that an individual can't buy it. They can. But I would much rather prefer my piece hanging somewhere in Parliament than someone's bedroom because It's meant to be consumed by more people to change society,
Yeah.
you know. So I think when people do purchase it, it is a good feeling, you know, because it also reaffirms that your work is seen and valued. It validates you as well, that your creativity is appreciated, you know. Because I mean, I know as an artist, if your art is not selling, it does kind of chip away at your ego.
Yeah,
It chips away at your soul. So when people do buy, I think it's just a reminder that your art is worth investing in. You know, it's not a waste of time. It is something that people find worth, you know, giving their time and money to. And it also motivates you to create more, you know. So, yeah, I won't lie, it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to know that there's someone out there who sees my work and is willing to pay for it, you know, because selling art is not easy, you know. But when you do, even if it's just that one sale, it's a win. You celebrate it, you know.
Exactly.
And also it helps you to get around some of your needs as well.
Yeah.
So I think it also feels relieving as well, because that means I can pay for some things that I've been needing to pay for. Or if there's debt that I need to pay for, okay, cool, now I have the funds to do it. It also instills some kind of dignity in me that I actually can go and buy myself a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
I can buy myself, you know, something to eat. I can take
course.
myself out for ice cream,
Yeah.
you know, buy more art materials, because that's another frustration that we have as artists, is that you have all these amazing ideas, but you don't have the money to purchase the materials to produce it. So I think that it definitely does reinstill some dignity into your craft.
Beautiful. I mean, the reason why I asked that is because, you know, the difference between actual entrepreneurs and tenderpreneurs. I mean, they get money from the government. Then obviously they grease hands. For you to actually go out there and sell a product and know that you the one that had to pitch this thing,
Yeah.
talk about the features, talk about the history, why you designed it, and someone purchased that. Hey man, it's not something that we should take for granted as entrepreneurs, because it's not easy.
Yeah, it's not.
Genuinely not easy. The rejection that you get at times just to make that one sale. Yeah, I get excited when I make a sale, I'm not gonna lie. Whether it's a book, whether it's someone wanting to do a workshop or a camp, I'm like, yo,
Yeah.
someone actually bought my product.
Yeah.
You know? So it's a beautiful thing, and I encourage you to enjoy that when that moment comes. Like, yo, jump up and down, sing to the world or something, because it's difficult. It really is difficult.
It is.
But it's a challenge that we've accepted. You know, it really, it's a beautiful feeling, you know, and I'm inspired. I think from this conversation, I've gotten more of an understanding that there's different aspects to the art. There's certain niches, and I'm definitely going to be focusing more. I'm going to be going to galleries within South Africa mostly.
Yeah, you
seeing
should.
what is
You
out
should.
there, you know, because I'm missing out.
I mean, they're
really-
free of charge, you know what I mean? I'm like, guys, just go, you
Yeah.
know? You don't even have to spend a dime. You just go there. Hopefully, you know, one day you'll be in a position to purchase an artwork,
Yeah,
you know, and support an artist.
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Oh man. And then what are you doing currently in terms of giving back? And I'm going to name drop here. So
Yeah.
you and I have a mutual friend. Shout out to Kganya Mogashoa, who's,
Yeah.
you know, doing the most with Mogashoa Business Leadership Firm. So with him, I've seen that you've done a lot of work with him.
Yeah.
If you can just take us through that, and if there's anything you're doing outside of what, you know, what he's doing there, what is it that you are doing?
Yeah, that's something that's very close to my heart. And that's one of the reasons why I am doing what I'm doing right now, equipping myself, because I'm realizing that in order for me to be in a position to speak into other people's lives, I need to be equipped for that. And I want them to be well equipped. I want them to be ready to compete on a global scale, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So one of the things that I do meet up with, women artists who are interested in knowing more about what I'm doing. Just a coffee, just to talk about the journey and what they can expect, and just to give advice. Sometimes that's all you need, just to, give you that push. You just need someone to remind you that, you can do this. I wish I had more of that when I started out. And so I do make time to meet with, young women who are interested in embarking on this journey, wanting to ask certain questions. Sometimes you don't have the time and space to do that in settings where there's events, because it's so rushed and there's so much happening. So I do give my time to that. If someone reaches out to me and says, even if it's just like a WhatsApp, voice note or a call or something, that's my way, one of my ways of giving back. I think those conversations are really needed. We take them for granted, but a lot of people need to be reminded that you can do this, you really can. I just had a meeting with one young lady this past week, actually on Monday, and, she was just asking me about some of the work that I'm doing and, just some advice on how to go about it. And I think it's so important to prioritize these conversations, because it helps them to bypass a lot of mistakes that maybe we have gone through, So I think one of the things that I also do is partnering with people like Kganya. I think that was me also taking it a step further, to give more of my time as well, instead of just sitting in the studio and, creating.
Gotcha.
I decided to join his youth empowerment tour. And he wasn't the only one as well that invited me for that. There were other schools. So it wasn't only township schools, also Model C schools. You'd be surprised that even in Model C schools, like, a lot of young people don't even understand how much potential they have in the arts, because when you have things like Career Day, you have people coming to talk about science and accounting, but who's there to talk about art? So that's where I saw the gap. And then when I was invited, I was like, okay, cool, I'll come through, talk a little bit more about my journey and inspire them as well, And as I think, even as we were talking before, behind the scenes, about how, we have old people coming to these events. We need more younger people who look like them, who mirror their image and likeness, to show them that, you can do this. You don't have to wait until you're 57 to suddenly take your talent more seriously. So I usually would go and take those opportunities to just share my story, my journey, how far I've come. And especially as a young female artist, I think that representation is very important, because we live in a society that wires young girls to be limited to certain things, right? Especially if you're a young female artist, it's like, okay, you're going to be an artist, so, you have to factor in, being challenged about finances, and how are you going to be showing up at home? How are you going to be a mother? How are you going to, because essentially marriage is seen as the highest form of achievement for girls, So now, on top of that, now you want to become an artist. So what are you going to do with your life? What is the plan? So I think there's a lot of stigmas around that are subconsciously weaved into our thinking patterns. And it's not a surprise that we don't have much female artists in the spaces we cohabit. It's always a weird thing. I always find myself in situations where I'm either the only female artist in a competition, or there's only 3 of us or 4 of us out of 21 artists. It's like, where are the rest? So I do those talks, at schools, and I think I embrace that, because a lot of that conditioning has to start at a school level before they even go out there and decide what they want to do with their lives. I remember dating back to when I was in school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I was a creative, but in terms of what specifically I'm going to be doing, I wasn't sure, right? I could just see myself running my own business. I could just picture myself sitting in my own office, with my pencil skirts and my pencil heels, but doing what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think going to these youth empowerment tours really encourages me to give them a feel and a sense of what to expect when they come into the space. And also because our education system doesn't really prioritize, visual arts as, a subject. A lot of young people are just pushed into the STEM. And I think that it's about time that we acknowledge that not everyone's brains are wired for that. And it's quite sad when you see a lot of young people being pushed into those spaces. And of course, they don't do well, and it can really break a person's spirit, right? It's not because there's anything wrong with them that they're not doing good at math, they're not doing well with science. It's simply because that's not who they're created to be. And what I've learned through my journey is that no matter what you try, I can sit for hours with a calculator trying to figure out balance sheets and income statements. And sometimes I will consult my accountant and be like, okay, cool, I don't understand this part. I've read it, but I still don't get it. I'm sorry. I'm trying. I just don't understand. I'm trying. And I used to work twice as hard as kids who were good at math because my brain is not wired for it. I have to put in twice as much work because, 1 + 1 for you is 100 times 100 for me. I need to think more. I need to do double the work because I'm just not wired for that. So I think that's really what moves my heart to really go into youth empowerment tours at schools, whether it's Model Cs or township schools. I think I've realized that it was also my assumption that in Model C schools, they're fine, they've got access to everything. But when I went there, I was like, wow, even the kids there are just like, I didn't know that this is something that I could do. I didn't know that this is something that I could aspire to become, because every single person that has come for career day at our school has only spoken to us about, economics or mathematics. And those things are great, but not everyone is going to become an accountant. Not everyone is going to become it. Also because we live in an era now and a generation where the careers that are going to exist in future are the ones that don't exist yet right now. So we need to have a futuristic approach to how we prepare young people from a solid, a foundational phase. So in terms of giving back, those are the ways that I give back right now. But I'm really excited for what's to come and the projects that I'm still going to do. Obviously, you can't do everything overnight. What I've really done over the past few years is honing in onto my skills, developing myself, developing my partnership capacity, community engagements, so that I can get to a point where I am ready to now build an ecosystem that is going to bring these young people in and prepare them to run their own businesses and use their art and their gifts to also make a difference in their own lives and the world. So those are some of the ways that I do give back. I usually give back a lot with my time. Quality time is one of them. But as time goes by, I can't wait to also get to a point, the Madam CJ Walker stage, where I can become a philanthropist, where I can just be like, you know what, let's take the school and build an art studio. Those are the type of things that I'm thinking about for the future.
Got you. Now these days, there's a war against Christianity. We've seen it with the Olympics and how they orchestrated the Last Supper.
Yeah.
And you've made it very clear that you are a staunch Christian, you are a true believer. In the space that you are in, do you face that, how do I put it? Do you face that where you can see that, no, the Christianity aspect, the disrespect for the Bible, for the religion, do you see that in your space?
Oh, absolutely.
For
All the
real?
time. All the time. I mean, nowadays, I actually think that people don't even create art anymore. They just perform rituals and they say that's the art.
Got you.
That is literally their showcase.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it's become. Where people just don't even bother putting in much effort anymore. It's definitely becoming more and more evident over time. And especially in our sector, I mean, there's, you know, you'll see when you go to exhibitions what kind of conversations are being had.
Yes.
It's kind of hard for us, I
can
must say.
imagine,
It's
yeah.
very hard because now you're contending with conversations around how to address, you know, the LGBTQ community, how to address, you know, how women's rights are being responded to, feminist movements. Not all of them are bad, you know, but there are some that can have some toxicity in them, you know. And we get that people are angry, rightfully so. Everybody deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of which path in life they choose to take, you know, and we respect that. But I find that as a Christian artist, you almost have to, it's like you have to be apologetic for telling the truth sometimes. And if you do, you have to be strategic about it, because as soon as people hear certain keywords like Jesus or the Bible, they just get turned off. They're like, no, I'm not going to this exhibition, you know. So you have to find, you know, strategic ways to communicate those things in such a way that they don't feel like you're shoving the Bible down their throats, and that you're acknowledging who they are in the midst of everything. And I think one of the things that God has really poured into my heart in terms of my content is to create content that speaks into justice for all people, for all women, specifically in the context of what I'm doing. And, you know, it speaks to God's heart for people in general. He does want justice. You know, he's not okay with people being treated unfairly and stuff like that. So I think one of the things I do is use my artwork to show people that God does care about your needs. He cares about the smallest details of your life. He cares about the fact that, you know, you can't walk safely around at night because you're a woman. He cares about the fact that, you know, every single day you have to watch over your back because you're worried about your safety. You don't feel protected around maybe the male counterparts that you are with. He cares about that. And I think that it's important for us to have that voice. Otherwise, people come up with other solutions that are not healthy. So I use my art as a way to also say that, you know, God cares about women's rights. He cares about their justice. And I think it's not an overnight thing. It's a journey. But I do sometimes experience that a feeling like a pushback, because it's a bit of a territorial space, right? In a dark way, in a dark sense, where there's a lot of artwork that is being created, you know, for things like ancestral worship. A lot of that is happening because, as I mentioned before, that there's a lot of conversations on culture erasure.
Gotcha.
And I get that we are trying to, you know, restore our stories as Africans, which is good. I tell African stories as well. I tell stories about African women who've made a difference in the world. I tell stories. I celebrate them. I don't worship them, but I create images to send a message that, this is the kind of shift that we need to be moving into as a society if we want to live out the change we want to see. And this is God's heart for women. This is the expectation or the framework that we can work around to reach a common goal around some of the things that are frustrating us. So it is a quiet, dark industry. And even when it came to the question about gatekeeping earlier, I didn't want to say it, but that is also a spiritual thing as well. Where there's certain entities around that limit you participating because you're going to come with a message that is going to disrupt certain things that are happening right now. So it's very hard sometimes to be open, but I've gotten to a stage where I'm becoming more and more unapologetic about it. I think that if they are so free to tell everything, then why should we be afraid? I've had situations where, for example, there was an artist who advocated for my work to be taken down. And later on, this person built an altar of worship to ancestors right where my artwork was removed. And these are some of the things that are happening. And I think also because I think it's quite deep, actually. It's a very spiritual, art is spiritual. I think that even when I come up with my ideas, a lot of the times I feel like it's God saying, he's directing me, do this, do that, even if it's just a brush stroke, So if someone is not walking in Christ, if their ideologies are not shaped by God, where do you think they're getting their ideas from, right? And it looks very noble from the outside. It's like, oh, wow, And I always tell people that if you buy art, always do research about the artist. Read the artist statement, the artist biography, because people are literally out there celebrating black magic. They're just buying art. You put it in your house and you don't know what you're introducing in your environment because people in their studios are burning incense. They're doing all sorts of things while they're creating that content. They're consulting, they're doing everything, and as an artist, you do get to a point where you have like a creative block sometimes. Some people go and consult just so that they can get ideas. They do all sorts of things. So it's like people are literally celebrating that. They're not even questioning it because they think it's cool. And I go to these exhibitions sometimes and I'm like, man, if only you. People will literally just come there, burn candles and whatever during a show. And, that's the exhibition, And I'm like, well, where's the art?
Got you.
In my mind at least.
Yeah.
And especially with the whole gatekeeping thing, I think I never used to understand why certain art sells at a certain price and stuff like that. I mean, you'll literally walk into a gallery, someone has literally maybe drawn a dot.
Yo.
And it's like 1 million and you're like...
Yeah, what the hell?
How?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things as well, where people are delving into certain things.
Got you.
And selling their souls for, those kind of opportunities. And you find artists that start off really well, really talking about genuine issues, and then all of a sudden, 4 years, 5 years down the line, now the art is about black magic, and you're like, wait, what happened? You started off talking about women's rights. Now you're talking about, it's like kind of, it's the same subject matter, but now you've tweaked it a little bit and added a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a bit creepy. But there's definitely a lot of celebration of darkness. And there's very few Christian artists that are speaking openly about their work, which also puts us at a deficit, at a huge deficit, because nobody's really willing to speak openly about it because they're afraid of losing opportunities. They're afraid of being secluded from certain, opportunities, offers.
Gotcha.
And they know that gatekeepers are gatekeeping.
Yeah, they're doing a very good job.
If you, for example, say something bad about, the LGBTQ community that maybe they don't like, oh well, there goes
It's over.
your career.
It's done.
So I mean, you really have to have wisdom around how you manage those kind of conversations in your work. But nevertheless, you shouldn't compromise on who you are and what you're doing, because there's a lot of compromise with artists who are Christian.
For sure.
Because of that fear that, if I say something, what if I'm banished forever? What if I lose, opportunities? What if I lose people that are supporting me? But there's quite a lot happening where people are just, people are selling their souls, even to galleries, where people will get opportunities to exhibit their work, but it comes at a cost.
I see.
And I've seen things like that where I think that's one of the reasons why I was reluctant in the beginning to work with like these major galleries, because
Gotcha.
I always had this fear that they're going to try and change my artistic direction, to certain things that I don't like.
Got you.
But it does happen where people will have to create content, that will speak to certain ideologies that are in the space of, darkness and whatever. And in exchange for that, maybe they'll pay for your car, your house, your art materials. So sometimes, when you're going through Instagram, it's not always as glamorous as it looks,
I see.
People are there at shows, 15,000 followers, have a nice big studio, but you don't know who's paying for that studio. You don't know who's organizing all of that stuff behind the scenes. So there's a lot of that happening as well. And also just, I could go on and on, man. This subject is very
deep.
vast.
It's deep, nah? Honestly, because I didn't want to bring it in, but I'm like, something just made me like, let me ask it. Let me just see where the space is at. Then I realized, okay, it's deeper than what I thought it was. Like,
yeah, it is. I mean, artists are very much responsible for shaping our culture, and I think it's a lie from the devil that art is not important. And somehow he's managed to convince society that it's not important, but it actually is the driving force behind informing how people behave every day. From the way you dress, the things you choose to eat. It's the music you listen to. It's the things you watch. That's what informs your thinking patterns, because every human being comes into the world ready to be programmed. And of course, we were originally supposed to be programmed by God, but unfortunately now, because of the fall of man, our minds are now being programmed by other things, and if you look at, how God used artisans, in the biblical side of things.
yes.
Artisans, decorators, artists, those were the people that were responsible for building the temple.
Yes.
So, we don't have a physical temple today, but we are technically building something. So if artists are not using their gift to build God's temple, what else are they building? So it can be a bit dangerous, because now you're building something else that is attributed to, other things that are not in line with where you've been called. So I think it really is very hard. And I think just to wrap the answer up, there's also a lot of warfare that Christian artists experience. People generally don't care about art that looks. If you paint a picture of Mary or whatever, nobody cares about that. But the minute you start addressing important issues that can change the course of history, that's where the devil is like, no, We need to get rid of you.
You're causing
you know.
problems now. Yeah.
Because now you're starting to temper with a system that has shaped people's thinking. And an image is very powerful because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, true.
That's the thing about paintings, right? That's why we have things like racism today, because someone thought it was a good idea to come to Africa and to draw an image that was a false representation of what Africans are. And now we're still, decades later, fighting that system, you know? So art is very, very powerful. And it really is deep-rooted in spirituality as well.
I can imagine, because now that you mention that, like, because yesterday, again, I went through a rabbit hole and there's something called the major forms of art.
Yeah.
And it mentioned that number 1 is paintings, number 2 is architecture, number 3 is sculpture, number 4 is theater, number 5, and it goes on. And it's like, those are the ones that obviously, you know, if you look at the finances and technology, like, they don't care about those. But that is what shapes the society. I mean, back in the day, in the Greek times, you know, people would go to, you know, amphitheaters to go watch theater, which is a representation of what's happening in the society at that time. And it's like, yo, man, we sleeping in art, but at the same time, there are people that are taking advantage of art and they're using that to, you know, not praise the one aspect, but the other aspect, you know? And thank you for that. Really, thank you for putting it into my perspective in that way. But not only are you facing spiritual or supernatural, but now these days you're also facing artificial. So how was the AI space affecting the art industry?
Well, AI is definitely not a word that artists like to hear, especially visual artists.
Yeah.
I think that to a certain extent, artists feel that sometimes it inhibits talent. Although there are pros and cons to it. I mean, look, it does help with certain things, like when I'm writing a proposal, makes my life easier. You know, I don't have to think. Okay, obviously I do have to think. I have to type out what I want to say and everything, but, you know, just to structure things properly and stuff like that to help me to get certain things in line. Because as an artist, you know, naturally I would want to spend more time in my studio. Gotcha. I don't want to spend hours doing admin.
Facts.
You know, where people in film also use AI as well, you know, where they don't have to spend decades of hours working on their scripts. Now, you know, AI is there to just make our lives easier. But I think to a certain extent, it does take away from real lived human experiences of creativity. And it can be a bit discouraging when you've created something and then, you know, someone takes a machine and, you know, the same thing is going to be created in a span of 2 minutes, and I've given my entire life and soul to it for days and months.
Exactly.
And also, it's a bit of a tricky space, I think, because there's a lot of copyright issues happening with that as well, licensing issues, where artists' rights are not being protected. So I think that is the fight that we are racing against when it comes to AI. That, I think, for me personally, when I think about AI, that's like the first thing that comes to my mind. It's like my art being stolen, you know, my creativity being stolen. How do we manage those kind of situations? Because it's bound to happen where, you know, when you put things out there in the internet, people use AI to do all sorts of weird things. And I mean, they can even like mimic people's voices and stuff like that. If they can do that, what more with my artwork, you know? So there's a lot of skepticism around it. But I'm also just like curious to see how, you know, things are going to unfold in terms of regulating that industry. It's not entirely bad, but I do think that a lot of artists have concerns around that. Like how is my copyright going to be protected? How are my rights going to be managed around this whole thing? You know?
Got you. Kganya Mogashoa. So, on this show, we usually ask the guest to tell me what you would like me to ask the next guest who's going to come on the show. The previous guest asked, what do you believe in and why? And you've pretty much answered that question. What question would you like me to ask the next guest?
That's interesting. I think the question I would ask is, what inspires you to do what you do, even if you don't get paid for it? What keeps you going?
Beautiful. I will definitely ask that question.
I'd like to see that next guest.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'll definitely let you know. Thank you so much for blessing us with the knowledge, the experience, the interesting facts, but also being very staunch with your beliefs. It is something that I've seen is lacking. And to come across someone who's very, proud of being a Christian and God-fearing, please keep that throughout your journey and keep fighting the good fight. There are people that are here to support you, X Factor Youth included, where we want to see you succeed. And despite the challenges that you face now and will continue to face, we are here to support you. We do see that you are excellent. You are truly exceptional. You have gone the extra mile with the things that you have done, and I do firmly believe you will continue to exceed expectations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And should I share
Oh yes, do your
where
thing,
people
man.
can find me?
Now's your time.
That was your job, actually.
No, now it's your time. Really, because the last question was, what would you like to share if you were given your, minutes to shine? Do your thing.
Okay, well, I think it would make sense for me to just speak about where people can find me on social media. For those who are interested in following me, that would be Instagram. Firstly, you can find me at Kganya Art. That's Koranges. I mean, the best way to remember it is K with an oranges in front of it. That's what I always tell people. You can't forget that. No. So it's Kganya_art on Instagram. And then on LinkedIn, it's Kganya Mogashoa. You can also search Kganya Art. You will find something there. But yeah, my page is Kganya Mogashoa. And I'm also on Facebook as well. I do have an art page there, also Kganya Art. And otherwise, if you're not on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, you can just Google me, Kganya Mogashoa, and you'll see what I do. You can also just Google Kganya Art, which will give you like an overview of some of the things that I've done and that have been documented about my story and my journey. And I think the last thing that I also wanted to share as well is that, if there are people who are invested in, some of the projects that have to do with women's advancement in society, I do enjoy those kind of collaborations. So I am open to, having collaborations like that, partnerships as well. And showcasing artwork at events, speaking engagements. And also, I also felt like I needed to share my travel journey as well. I will be traveling to Dallas, Texas this month on the 27th of August. And I think for the first time during Women's Month, I'm not going to be in my country. But I think that it's a one step to, taking what I'm doing in South Africa and taking it to the world. That's the whole point anyway of what I'm doing. So I will be documenting my journey while I'm there as well and sharing it on my social media pages. So please do share, so that more people can be aware. And at least I'm not going to be the only female artist there for a change, you know. They were actually looking for female artists. That's how I got selected for that program. So it's an art residency program. It's called the Indibano Art Residency. And I will be there for about 2 months. And I will be creating artwork and content that will be speaking into women's rights, not just in South Africa, but also in the US. As you know, there's a shift happening right now in America. You know, Kamala Harris is running for president, which is, you know, we're living in very interesting times. I feel like God is starting to disrupt our theology a little bit there, where, you know, we also have our new Chief Justice, who's female as well in South Africa. So I think it's really challenging us to think very differently about how we manage leadership culture in our respective countries. So yeah, those are going to be some of the subject matters that I'll be looking at during the residency program. And I look forward to sharing it with you guys. And yeah, just, you know, coming back with as much as I can in South Africa. And as I said, sharing it with the people that I'm going to be mentoring going forward. So yeah, that's me.
That's right. No, blessings, blessings, blessings. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the great Kganya Mogashoa. She's going all the way to America. Dallas, Texas, baby. Let's go. Hopefully you don't come back with the accent though, you know.
I'll try not to, because it's so
Please.
contagious, guys. Have you been
Please.
around Americans just for 5 minutes?
Please, yo, man. Please, like, just keep the accent that you have. But please, again, follow Kganya Mogashoa on the social medias. If you feel inspired by this conversation, do subscribe. But more importantly, do follow her and her journey. Because big things are popping, man. History is being made as we speak. So shout out to you, man. Thank you so much for attending. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bliss Sibia, Kganya Mogashoa, X Factor Youth Podcast. Signing off.
Put some respect, man, I'm running no force. Killing my crew, got guys and got boys. Funny V class, spacing time, but we posh. And niggas act like they ain't seen the boy. Put some respect, man, I'm running no force.